Thank you, Hope. I am so honored to be here. Thank you to Hope for putting on another fabulous VegFest. Yay. So welcome. I goofed. You can see it. I didn't edit my presentation properly. My apologies. But I am Marji Beach, and as Hope said, I'm the education director for Animal Place, which is a nonprofit sanctuary for rescued and abused farmed animals. We operate 2 facilities, a sanctuary in Grass Valley, California, where we have around 250 animals on 600 acres. And those animals, they come to that sanctuary and they stay there for the remainder of their lives. And then we also have a really cool program and rescue and adoption center called Rescue Ranch, which is my precious little baby. I love it very much. And that facility is a little different. We actually provide kind of temporary safe haven for rescued farmed animals, mostly hens from the egg industry. And instead of staying there with our wonderful crew, Jan, who's an amazing activist and advocate, oversees the care of the animals there. We actually place them into permanent homes, which means we can maximize the number of individual lives who are saved. Animal Place has been around since 1989. We also have several other cool programs, Brave the Cage, our vegan store, the Vegan Republic. Check our table out. Hannah, our animal care director, is here in the audience as well. So I love what we are doing. I think it's, okay, he said, allegedly. All right. Yeah. All right. So my presentation today is called Certified Cruelty, and it's about dispelling the myths of this kind of emergence of humane, quote-unquote, animal farming. My focus in this presentation is on the egg industry, and the primary reason for that is because Animal Place is one of the few organizations in the country that actively rescues hens and roosters from the egg industry, mostly hens. We rescue probably 3,000 to 5,000 animals a year. So we're uniquely positioned to offer insight into this kind of myth about humane farming, particularly the egg industry. Anything I talk about with one industry is easily applicable to any other industry, including the dairy and the animal flesh industry as well. Sorry that the formatting got weird with this. So I have 2 goals with this presentation. One is to dismantle the lies that animal agriculture puts forth to legitimize and normalize the oppression of other animals, as well as to empower you. I love having these talks and sharing, my information and my stories, but the most important thing anybody can do is change their own behavior as well as work to influence the behavior of others around them. So I'm going to give you a few options at the end of the presentation for how you guys can, and women, how you men and women can, and others, help non-humans. Sorry if I want to be inclusive here. So I talked a little bit about Animal Place's Rescue Ranch. Since we started the program in 2010, 20,311 lives have been saved. These are individuals who would otherwise have been in the egg industry, what we called gassed and trashed, which I'll talk about later, but they would have been killed. And how amazing is it that we have this facility and we're able to bring 20,000 lives into this world who go out and change the lives of other human beings. So I really love this program. And what's really cool is that in a week and a half, there'll be 1,500 rescued hens from a battery cage facility coming to our Vacaville Rescue and Adoption Center. This is a great opportunity. Thank you. Yay. This is a great opportunity for all of you, if you're interested, to come out and help. We need volunteers the first 20 days to help with a variety of, not just the first 20 days, but those are the most important. When we rescue hens from battery cage farms, as with most chickens, the transition from farm to freedom is very hard on them. And when all you've known is confinement in a barren metal cage, and all you can do to find comfort is to huddle with your fellow cage mates, suddenly having a large barn and pasture and freedom is very overwhelming. And so what happens with these birds is they actually pile on top of each other, and they can smother the birds beneath them, and they're just not physically strong to get out from that pile. Just an hour of your time, 7 to 8 o'clock at night, you can help unclump those hens, and it's a powerful experience. Because you know this is the trauma they've endured from the egg industry. And so how amazing is it that you have a story that is not about like, oh, I saw this speaker at the VegFest and she said this. It's you saying, no, I was there. I was there physically pulling hens off of each other. And this is what the egg industry has done to these individuals. So having stories is one of the most powerful ways to create change for non-humans. So the way I do this presentation is through storytelling. I want to introduce you to some of the individuals who Animal Place has saved from the egg industry, and talk a little bit about how it's really not the differences in perhaps how they were housed. Maybe some of them were not debeaked, when their beaks are cut off. Maybe they're from organic farms or certified humane or pasture-based farms. Like all those differences maybe matter on some small level, but really it's the similarities between all the different ways we exploit and farm, in this case chickens, that I think is more provocative and is a more pertinent reason for why we shouldn't use other animals for human benefit. So we have 3 hens here. This is Rosie. Rosie is from a certified humane organic farm. We did this rescue last September of 500 hens from this particular facility. Susie is from a rescue we did in April of this year from a conventional battery cage farm where there's between 12 to 15 hens in very large metal cages. And then Felicity is from one of the largest rescues we've ever done, the Turlock rescue, which happened in 2012. We saved the lives of 4,460 hens from a facility in Turlock, California that had basically abandoned the hens for 2 weeks in their cages without food. And so by the time authorities had intervened, 20,000 of the birds had starved to death, and the remainder were being gassed by officials. And we parked ourselves outside the farm and negotiated with the animal control director of Stanislaus County, and were able to get custody of hens the state officials deemed what they called salvageable. And that happened to be over 4,400 hens. So she's from that rescue. One of the unique things about Rescue Ranch is, wow, I'm so sorry that got a little goofed up here, but is that we often know a lot more about the animals than we might if we were doing individual rescues. Maybe they come from cruelty cases or from shelters. We may not have a full background on the animals we save, especially at our main sanctuary. But with Rescue Ranch, we do. We know the hatcheries that these birds came from. We know the vaccines they received, if they were dewormed, if they were debeaked, at what age. We have a much broader picture of these individuals, more so than we do in many of our individual rescues. So despite the fact that these 3 hens came from 3 very different facilities in different parts of California, all 3 of these hens originated from a hatchery called Highline Hatchery. It's one of the world's largest hatcheries. If you purchase brown eggs from the grocery store, Highline produces 50% of the hens who go on to produce those eggs. In the United States, if you buy white eggs from the supermarket, 80% of those white eggs came from hens who came from Highline Hatchery. So they're very, very large in the hatchery world. So even though Rosie is from a very small, organic, certified humane farm, and these 2 birds are from 2 different battery cage farms, their lives all started in the same company's hatchery. And I want to talk a little bit about what the hatchery is like. Let's get all these pictures up. I think it's easy for a lot of people to forget what egg production is for most bird species, all bird species. It's to produce the next generation. They're producing babies, essentially. In the wild, a hen will lay on her nest. She'll incubate about 12, maybe 5 to 12 eggs at a time over a 27-day period. She'll actually talk to those eggs, and as they get closer to hatching, the chicks, start talking back to her. It's one of the most important social bonds that birds, most avian species, develop before they even take their first breath outside the egg. It's an incredibly important social bond because when those chicks hatch out, they need to be able to hear who their mother is so they don't walk up to the wrong chicken and get pecked or injured. So that is, when I think about it, and if you think about it, the chicken and turkey industries, they all hatch chicks in artificial incubators. So we deny the most important first social bond to literally over 9 billion little baby chicks in the turkey and chicken industries. It's very heartbreaking. This is what a highline hatchery looks like. It's an artificial incubator. There'll be like dozens of these inside a warehouse with up to 300,000 eggs being artificially turned and incubated until they're hatched out. And when they're hatched out, half of them are going to be male and half of them will be female. It's the ratio in chickens. Males in the egg industry, they don't lay eggs. You don't need a lot of them to be used as parent or breeder flocks to produce the next generation. So they have very little value. They don't grow like the broiler or Cornish crosses grow, who are all killed when they're babies. They're 6 weeks old. These roosters take 6 to 8 months to reach physical maturity. So they don't have a value to the egg industry. And it doesn't matter if you buy pasture-based, certified, humane, organic, cage-free, free-range eggs. Every egg came from a hen whose brother was killed at hatching. So the American Veterinary Medical Association's approved method of disposing of what they call hatchery waste, these live male chicks, is through a process called maceration. And these little baby chicks are thrown into an industrial grinder, fully conscious, and that is how the industry disposes of male chicks. And it's between 150 to 200 million male chicks a year. They don't keep accurate numbers on them because they have literally no value to the egg industry. And so that happens in hatcheries that supply organic, pasture-based, farmers markets, free-range, mail-order hatcheries that supply the backyard chicken movement. So male chicks, if you oppose the killing of other animals, then you shouldn't eat eggs because obviously the male chicks are killed. The female chicks, in 95% of all cases, are going to go through a horrible mutilation that if you ever go to a sanctuary and you meet some of these hens, you'll see how deprived it makes them in life. This is a debeaking machine, so the chicks are literally hung by their heads, and a hot laser, in the case of highline hatchery, it severs up to 50% of their beak. They do this so quickly that oftentimes they'll actually debeak more than 50% of the hen's beak. We have some chickens at Animal Place and Rescue Ranch who have up to 75% of their beak removed. And when you get to that point, their tongue is actually being cut off. So it's a horrible mutilation. It's done without pain relief. The beak has blood vessels and nerves that run to the very tip of that beak. It's incredibly painful. They can't clean themselves. It's hard for them to eat properly. It really sets them at a disadvantage for the rest of their lives. And of course, they do this on conventional battery cage operations, on cage-free facilities, and then on large free-range operations. We used to rescue hens from a beautiful pasture-based facility that was up in a northern climate, so it was very cold and it got snow in the wintertime. So they debeaked because they kept the birds confined in barns for 6 months out of the year when it snowed. So even on this really nice farm, these birds were still mutilated. So on the right side is, my shoe is untied. Maybe I'll talk while I tie my shoe. Or I won't talk, talking in the microphone. Sorry about that. So on the right side is an aerial view of one of the larger battery cage operations in Michigan, and this has about 3 million birds inside these sheds. And inside each shed, there'll be tiers of cages with between 3 to 7 birds per cage. And this is how 94% of all hens in the egg industry are confined. Most people recognize battery cage facilities and are opposed to them. So what are some other types of housing? This is a cage-free facility. Cage-free just means they're in one big cage, not in little tiny metal cages. Cage-free facilities will still have a large number of chickens inside a barn. They're still debeaked because they can't form a normal social structure. When you cram 20,000 birds inside a shed, there's no way a normal hierarchy can form. So they cut their beaks off. And that's where they live. You can see they have some perches, but it's very crowded. It has the birds in battery cage farms maybe have between 48 to 77 square inches of space per bird. It's like a piece of paper. The birds in cage-free facilities might have 140 square inches, so like maybe a couple pieces of paper. So it's not much improvement. And then we've been on farms that have, those are like mobile, what they call mobile chicken tractors, pasture-based farms. Most of the sickest birds we've ever rescued have come from pasture-based and organic farms, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But those are the kinds of housing. And I want to talk about why housing may not matter, why advertising does matter, and how farms really set the public up to kind of totally fail and misunderstand their facilities. So this is a farm in Sebastopol, Petaluma, it doesn't matter. Judy's family farm, actually it's in Sonoma County. This is a picture from their website. As you can see, it's a nice bucolic facility. This is what their cartons used to look like. So they're organic, certified humane, and there were these very key words. The hens are raised in wide open spaces in Sonoma Valley where they're free to roam, scratch, and play. So you would expect that Judy's family farm allows their birds outside. In reality, this is what the inside of their farms look like. They're cage-free facilities. The birds don't have access to outdoors. And this is what the aerial view of their facility looks like. It doesn't look much different than that large farm in Michigan, which had battery-caged birds. So you can see they live in these sheds. They also operate a dairy farm, so there's like a manure lagoon up there at the top. And luckily, the Animal Legal Defense Fund caught them on this, and they actually sued Judy's family farm for false advertising. And surprisingly, they actually won their lawsuit. And the farm had to take off the labeling, and they also had to donate money to the Sonoma Humane Society, which, amazingly, the Sonoma Humane Society used that money to build really nice coops. They're one of our flock partners, so when we do large rescues, some of our flock partners' shelters will take in some of the birds and find homes for them. So it actually benefited the birds who we rescue as well. So this is Felicity and some of her flock mates. And I just want to share this story because everyone talks about organic as being this amazing thing, and it's the healthiest and it's the best thing ever for both the animals and the environment and the humans who consume these products. Felicity came from a farm that is certified humane. It's a third-party certifier that says this farm's really great. They're also an organic farm, so that means they don't give the animals antibiotics. They feed them organic feed. Organic is the only label that does have legal standing if it was ever enforced, but those farms do have to provide outdoor access for the birds. So we pull up to this facility, and there's no grass because they're in a part of California that is basically a desert. You know, during the spring and the summer, they get rain January and February, and that's it. So there's no dirt. And the stench was... At first, I didn't understand what the smell was coming from. I thought it was like a bunch of dead birds. But it was their food, which was stored in these open boxes, totally moldy, just disgusting organic food, exposed to the elements, exposed to wild animals. And then we see where these birds live. And again, they don't have any grass to graze on. And they're in this dirt lot. And they're in these chicken sheds that don't have predator protection or protection from the environment, which means that they're sitting, huddling at night in freezing temperatures. The wind's blowing through. It's a very windy area. So they're very susceptible to diseases. And because this farm does not provide antibiotics or any kind of life-saving medical treatment, treating these birds as individuals, all these birds came to us incredibly ill. And at first we thought, okay, maybe they just have a little respiratory infection and we'll treat them and then we'll get them ready for adoption. But it turned out that they had some diseases that were very detrimental to their health and that did not make them, they were not adoption candidates. So that meant we had 500 birds from a farm who we could not place into private homes. And luckily, we had someone step up and offer to pay to take care of them for the rest of their lives. So they're actually on a separate facility, and Hannah and her crew go over there every day to take care of these birds. These are by far the sickest birds we have ever rescued. And by the time we got them, no antibiotic was ever going to help them at that point. More than half of them have died, and that's because had they been given treatment at the beginning, had they been treated as individuals as you would a dog or a cat who is your beloved companion, they would be alive today. And not only that, they would be in homes, and they would be, through their own selves, teaching people about the amazing qualities of chickens. We're very happy that the ones who are with us are still alive and are doing as well as they can. But when you talk about organic, I really want you to remember Felicity and to think about what she went through and how her life as an individual had zero value. It's about treating flocks, not individuals, and how, we had, when we pulled up and they were looking at them, there were more than 24 birds who didn't have eyes because they had these massive abscesses that were never treated. And then those birds who did have abscesses lost their eyes. So these were very compromised animals who came from a certified humane organic farm. I have a prop, mini props. So I want to talk a little bit about production levels. So let's say you're not with me on this. You still think, okay, I can find that nice farmer's market or friend next door with their backyard chickens who have some cute little birds. I want to talk about what we as a species has done to this species. We've taken a bird. This is Irma. She's our oldest chicken at Animal Place. She sings a beautiful song when she's about to lay an egg. You can hear it from probably a quarter mile away. It's the song of her people. But she doesn't lay many eggs now, but like in her prime, when she was much younger, at most, and I mean at most in a year, she would lay 24 eggs, at most. Now, if she were allowed to hatch those eggs, which we don't allow breeding at the sanctuary, and let's say her first clutch, she had 10 eggs and 3 survived, she'll have another clutch that spring and that summer. If 10 survive, she might not. She might just have that one clutch through the whole year. Chickens are supposed to stop laying in the winter or significantly decrease egg production because it makes no sense for a very light-sensitive species to produce babies during a time of year when there's not enough food and there's not enough resources. So Irma doesn't lay eggs, doesn't lay eggs at all, really, but definitely not in the winter. She's a little game fowl. It's kind of what the ancestors of chickens look like. She's about like that big, tiny. This is Taylor, and Taylor's, like they call them heritage breed. She's a speckled Sussex. They're dual purpose, so they're exploited for their flesh as well as egg production. And she probably lays maybe 140 eggs a year, so maybe 10 or 11 dozen. This is a pain in the rear end here, but I want you to see this visual. These never had eggs in them. I just bought them empty, just to be clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. Let's just say 10 dozen. That's still a lot of eggs to produce in a year. Okay. So these 2 hens are both graduates of the Rescue Ranch Adoption Program. And the one on the left is what's called a red sex link, and those birds produce brown eggs. Brown eggs come from brown hens. White eggs come from white hens. It's a very simplified explanation. And then the hen on the right is a white leghorn, who is by far the most common breed used in the egg industry for egg production. And I'm not going to stack everything out because it'll take me forever. Okay. So we have selected these birds to go from producing 2 dozen eggs a year to producing between 22 to 25 dozen eggs. The average American consumer eats about 250 shelled eggs every year. The average white leghorn and red sex lynx produces between 250 to 300 eggs a year. We've bred these birds to essentially produce the number of eggs the average American consumer wishes to eat in a calendar year. And what does that do to their bodies? There has to be consequences to producing 5 times more eggs than a 3-pound bird should ever produce. And there are. These birds are incredibly prone to osteoporosis. When you think about it, a chicken has a little tiny store of calcium that they use to produce that shell. And then they use a little bit of protein to produce the yolk. And then that store goes away because they've produced the number of eggs they need in a clutch, who they're going to produce for the next generation. So the only other viable source of calcium for a hen, and she has no choice in the matter, is from her skeletal system. So her body literally leaches calcium from her bones to produce that shell. These birds are incredibly small. They have like no muscles, they have no fat, and that's because all of the protein they should be using to lay down muscle is being used to produce the egg yolk. It's used to produce that egg yolk for an egg basically every 24 to 27 hours. Bone fractures are very common in these birds. Even when we rescue birds from like cage-free facilities, sometimes they'll jump off a bale of straw, which is like 2 feet high, and they'll break a hip. They're very fragile animals. Ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer is the leading cause of death in white leghorns and red sex lynx. If you adopt these birds, their average lifespan, instead of being like 8 to 12 years, is more like 2 to 4 years. So they die very young, and it's mostly from ovarian cancer. Human beings and the white leghorn are the most studied breed and species for ovarian cancer because we're the only human women, and then white leghorns, we're the only ones who have such high rates of ovarian cancer. Eggs get stuck inside of them, they're prone to infections, they have very suppressed immune systems, and their lifespans are very shortened, unfortunately. And even the hens who are used for like organic farming or pasture-based farming are still breeds who have been bred to overlay or produce more eggs than they should. So there is no like happy sanctuary where all 300 million egg-laying hens go after their productive lifespan is over. And what the egg industry considers a productive lifespan is 18 months or 24 months. So they're very young animals when they're sent to slaughter. In California, there is no slaughterhouse that takes spent laying hens. Those closed down in 2006. So what happens to those hens, and I've seen it done several times, and there's nothing really more sad, but they gas them. So they're these big, at this farm, they were using actual carbon dioxide gas chambers. They throw 100 birds in those, so the birds on the bottom are just being smothered to death, and then they funnel the gas in. At the farm where we're rescuing from, which we've been to a few times, they literally use trash bins. So they have big, giant trash bins, and they throw 50 birds in, and then they funnel the gas in. And oftentimes, they'll throw them out, and you'll just see this big, white, fluffy pile of hens, and then you'll see this little hen pop up because she wasn't gassed properly. And I remember driving away from this farm, and we had been working alongside the people who were pulling the birds to kill them, and we're being so gentle and so kind because we know how fragile these birds are, and they're just ripping them out because they get paid by the bird. And one of the hens had popped up out of the dead pile, and we were driving away, and I so wish I had stopped and just like run out there because the way they kill them after they pop up from the dead pile is they break their neck. And he just swung her around like she was nothing. Like this little being who wanted to live had literally no value. And it's something I'll never forget. And people, even animal welfare groups, talk about gassing as being a kinder way to die. Chickens don't have lungs like we do. They have air sacs. And they have these little air sacs under their wings, in their chest. They're very sensitive to changes in their air in their environment. Gassing is incredibly stressful and painful for them. It's one of the worst ways for them to die. And that's how all spent hens in California are killed. We call it gassing and trashing because after they're gassed, they send them to landfills. So again, highlighting how these birds have no value to the egg industry. In the big egg states, California is the 7th largest egg state. You have big egg states like Iowa, Ohio. They still kill them the same way they kill Cornish or broiler chickens. That means they're pulled from cages, they're put in transport trucks, they're transported to the slaughterhouse, they're ripped out, they're shackled up by their legs, they're run through what's called an electrified water bath. It's supposed to kill them or render them unconscious. Oftentimes the voltage is so low that it renders them immobile, meaning they still are conscious. And then a rotating blade slices their throat, and they have a backup cutter to cut their throats, and that's how those hens in other parts of the country are killed. And it doesn't matter if that farm was a really nice farm and gave them a really great life, and they had room to roam, and they had their beaks, and they could make nests, and they could do fun things. At the end of the day, when they reach 1 to 3 years of age, their economical value, which is only in egg production, is gone. So the value now is either the landfill, which is nothing, or maybe they'll get 10 cents a bird to sell them for fast food, for pet food, for chicken soup. That's where those birds end up. I always get a question about backyard hens. And, it's a tough line for me to walk because our Rescue Ranch program adopts out birds, and we do adopt into homes that are not vegan. And so we understand that some of these adopters are going to be eating the eggs. What's really interesting is that since adopting, 70% of our adopters have started feeding the eggs back to the birds. If they're eating some of the eggs but still feeding the eggs back to the birds, we consider that a win. We do feed, I know it's creepy, I saw some looks out there, refeed the eggs back to the birds because it resupplies them with calcium and protein that they lose daily from overlaying. Those aren't our eggs. And if you ever come to the sanctuary and you see chickens, when they see eggs, it's like their favorite treat, as Hannah can attest to. They love boiled eggs, and it's based on a natural behavior. If an egg cracked in a nest, that would be a big eat me sign to predators, so they'll always eat that egg under natural conditions. But backyard chickens, so most people don't adopt through our program. About 20 million birds are sold and transferred every year for backyard chicken enthusiasts. Most people get these chickens from mail order hatcheries, and those are literally mail order, they ship them through the Postal Service. It is legal to ship 72-hour-old or younger chicks through the Postal Service with no temperature control, and that's how most people get their chickens. The birds who are used to produce those little chicks people buy, those breeder parent flocks, they're all killed when they're 18 months old. They all live indoors. They're not allowed outdoor access. So they have very little value outside of breeding purposes. Most of the people are buying chickens who have high production levels because they want them for eggs, which means they're suffering the same side effects that the hens we rescue suffer from overproduction. Roosters are a huge problem. Every day we get between 5 to 10 calls or emails asking us to take in a rooster. And people don't realize that chicken sexing can be more of an art than science on some of these facilities. And so they often will either use rooster chicks as packing peanuts to keep hen chicks warm, or they'll mis-sex a rooster chick and include it in the shipment. And most places don't allow roosters. People who want chickens often want them for eggs. They want the hens, so they don't want a male chicken who isn't going to produce eggs. And so they either kill them, they abandon them. We've had several calls with people who just we rescued Beardsley, one of our roosters. He survived living on the highway for 2 months. Before someone finally was able to rescue him. And that means someone drove up on the side of a highway and just dumped out 2 baby roosters and just said, go fend for yourself. And so that's a very common problem. Now, we think chickens make amazing companion animals. They're intelligent, they're quirky, they're funny. They're just like busy little toddlers in chicken bodies. I know Hannah will disagree with the toddler reference, but I'm still saying it. They're just really fun animals. But we want them to be seen as companions, as kind of co-species living on this earth with us, and not as So no matter what kind of farm you get eggs from, these are all the similarities between those different facilities. So the male chicks are still always killed, and they're killed in horrific ways by being ground up alive. The hens suffer the ill effects of overproduction. Like, we rescue them and we give them a great life and we feed them good food. They get individual medical care, names. They have the life a chicken should have, but we cannot overcome what has been done to their bodies. We just can't. We can't fix them, which is it's just screwed up. The farms don't practice individual care. So even though we have over 100 chickens, if one is ill, she is pulled from the flock and she is provided the individual care you would provide to a companion dog or cat, because we see them as individuals. They don't do that on farms because they can't. If you have 3 million birds, you're not going to go around to each cage, or you have 20,000 birds, you're not going to go to each bird and give them the individual health care that they need. 95 to 98% of hens are debeaked because that is for the conventional farms, battery cage farms, as well as cage-free facilities, which make up between 95 to 98% of all farms supplying eggs. And then hens are killed at a fraction of their lifespan. All farms do this. Every single farm does this, because you can't constantly have live hens who don't produce eggs while you're bringing in young hens. You don't have the facilities for that. So the farm we rescue from kills birds twice a year. And they're killing 50, 60,000 birds every time. And we come in and we take about 1,500, which is incredible for the birds, but it's a fraction of the number of lives who are being taken. How can you help? Well, I know this is probably preaching to the choir here, but going vegan is the easiest way that anybody can help other animals. It's the kindest thing you can do for farm. If you love animals, you should not be eating them. Their bodies, their milk, their eggs, those don't belong to you. They are not yours. They belong to the animals. So the easiest thing to help hens and roosters in the egg industry is to stop contributing to their suffering, which we do every time we go to the supermarket or farmer's market, or we buy backyard eggs or chickens. So it's to opt out of this really cruel system. I don't think anybody can really look at all of animal agriculture in its entirety and think it's a really nice way to treat 10 billion land animals every year. So this is the easiest thing you can do, I promise. If you want reasons for why to go vegan, maybe you're not quite there, probably the easiest thing to do then beyond going vegan is to volunteer your time at a sanctuary. And there are a lot of sanctuaries in California that you can do this. Animal Place is one of them. We have volunteer opportunities in Vacaville and Grass Valley. But there's several sanctuaries in the Bay Area who you can also volunteer your time at. There's nothing more powerful than participating. We have, in our rescues, we always have volunteers come because there's nothing more powerful than going into a farm, physically pulling out one of these literally battered. They have no feathers. They're just in horrific conditions. And watching them be chickens for the first time, when they get out of cages, there are some behaviors they do instantly. They will just suddenly find a pile of straw and think it's like a dust bath, and they'll just fluff up and kick it around. They'll scratch in the dirt. If they feel a sunbeam, they'll just immediately lay down and fling their wings out. Sunbathing, dust bathing are the most instinctive behaviors that chickens have that are denied to them. And for these chickens, they've been denied that for between 18 and 24 months. And so it's amazing to me that they come from that and then they still are able to exhibit these normal natural behaviors, as well as perching and other things. So definitely check out our table and sign up to volunteer. We need help September 1st through the 10th and beyond for the new rescue we're doing. I think because humans are, oh my goodness, are really a species of storytellers. One of the most powerful things you can do is to share the stories of these individuals as well as the experiences you have. you have more influence on your little sphere, your circle, your family, your friends, your colleagues than certainly I or an organization or anybody does. So use this opportunity when you volunteer, when you go on a rescue, when you meet a chicken, to share their stories and to share the experience that you had. The reason that I'm here at all is because as a college student, I participated in some pretty horrible things, inflicting needless cruelty on farmed animals. And I wanted to be a veterinarian, and that was my dream for my whole life, from age 5. And so my whole trajectory was focused on being a veterinarian. And I wanted to be a large animal vet. And so when I got to UC Davis and signed up in their animal science program, one of the requirements of this program is to intern at one of the animal raising facilities. Now, I was a vegetarian coming into the program, and I loved cows, so I picked the dairy farm. And one morning, there was a cow who was having trouble giving birth. And the way you help a cow give birth is you wrap chains around the calf's legs and you pull the calf out. And I was the one who literally pulled this baby out. And objectively, I knew what was going to happen next, but there is nothing to prepare you for what it is like when you steal someone's child from their mother. And so this cow is down, and she is crying, and the calf, they just drag him off. They don't nurse. They don't have even a first grooming session. They just take him away. And the cow just let out this cry that I had never heard before, and it just resonated in my bones. And it was a cry of sorrow and grief. I don't know what else it could have been. And then the calf starts crying. And so not only was I directly participating in orphaning this little baby calf, I realized just like that, oh, this is my glass of milk. This is who I hurt every time I buy ice cream and cheese and milk. And I couldn't be a part of that anymore. And that was the most powerful experience that I've had. And I went vegan that day, and I decided I wanted to be an ally to farmed animals, not their abuser, not their exploiter, be it through my paycheck or my actual actions. I didn't want to contribute to that. And I share that story because I think it's a powerful story, but it's that story that changed my life, and that changed, I think, the lives of other animals who I've directly and indirectly been able to help and save. So those experiences happen at sanctuaries, they happen at rescues, they happen through advocacy and activism. They're incredibly powerful. One of the most easy, if you want a powerful experience, go to the auction. Petaluma has one. Escalon has one. These are public places where the bodies of bright, intelligent, individual animals are sold on a daily basis. And you can go in there and you can see how they're treated. They're from organic, small, big, large farms. It's very powerful. Then you can bring their stories to a wider audience because their stories deserve to be heard. I think I only have 4 minutes, so instead of anything else, I'll just, if there's any questions people have. Oh my, okay. Yeah. Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, Tracy. That's a very good question. I remain baffled to this day why we work with this battery cage farm twice a year, and they're giving us the birds for free. So I'm not real sure. They're not making a lot of money from us, by us rescuing less than 1% of the birds being killed. For some of the farms, it's probably just cheaper and easier to have us go in. They don't have to hire people. I like to think with the farm we're working with that maybe at some point he's going to stop farming chickens. But we've had what one farm actually did. They loved what we did. There's a pasture-based farm. He had a real hard time sending the birds to slaughter, and he eventually stopped doing it, which was really incredible. Yeah, so those were several thousand fewer birds being brought into the world. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. So they're collected every day, and we actually boil them up and we feed them back to the birds. They get calcium that they lose from laying and protein from the yolk as well. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.